Good morning, Carroll County. This is Brian DeLeonardo, your state's attorney, with this week's State's Attorney Report. As we get into December, one of the things as attorneys, as I've discussed before, we have about 19 attorneys in the office, but we certainly could not do our job in the courtroom without having just tremendous staff. And so this month, I really wanted to highlight our staff and have them come in and tell you a little bit about what they do. This morning, I'm very pleased to have Karen Brown join us, who will talk a little bit about extradition. So good morning, Karen.
Good morning, Brian.
Let's start there because, again, I think it's going to be interesting for people to hear a little bit about what goes on behind the scenes in the state's attorney's office. Tell us what you do.
I handle extraditing fugitives who are picked up in other states. It could even be another country, and bringing them back to Maryland to face charges. And we also charge many individuals as fugitives who are wanted in other states who may be residing in our county or are pulled over on a traffic stop in our county, and we subsequently find that they are wanted in another jurisdiction or state.
Now, how long have you worked in the office?
I have been at the office for 7 years.
Let me ask you about, because I think it's interesting for people to hear this, when you're going out and you're grabbing people that maybe have fled to bring them back to Carroll County in order to have justice, how many of those do you get about a year?
I would say on average it's around 150 is probably a good average number, sometimes a little more, closer to the 200, but 150 is a pretty good number.
So essentially when someone gets caught in some other jurisdiction, what exactly do you do to go about bringing them back?
The first thing that we do is our notification is received from the police department, such as the state police, the Carroll County Sheriff's Department, Westminster City Police, and they notify me that a detainer has been lodged against a person who has an outstanding warrant. That could be a bench warrant issued by a judge or an arrest warrant issued by a district court commissioner. Once that detainer is lodged, then the formal extradition proceedings can begin, dependent upon if they have local charges in the state that they are picked up in, if you will. So as soon as they are done locally with their charges, then extradition process can begin, which can happen in many ways. It can happen via a waiver of extradition, where a defendant waives his rights to come across state lines to be tried. Or it could be on an interstate agreement on detainers, which is for defendants who are incarcerated in other states. They're currently serving sentences, and they are filing for a speedy trial under the Interstate Agreement on Detainers Act. Or another way of extradition is through a governor's warrant. And a governor's warrant is obtained when a defendant refuses to waive extradition, refuses to come back to Maryland to stand trial, and we can file for a requisition to obtain a governor's warrant, which would be sent to our Maryland governor's office. In turn, our Maryland governor's office would contact the governor's office of that state where the fugitive is residing. A warrant can be issued and served.
So obviously, one way or the other, when they get caught somewhere, we can bring them back here to stand trial, right?
Absolutely.
Now, most of the time, when you're extraditing, it's going to be from states surrounding us, whether it's Pennsylvania, Virginia, maybe West Virginia. But tell us a little bit about what's the farthest that we've had an occasion to bring someone back.
The furthest would absolutely have to be Mexico. We did have an international extradition from Mexico, but we also have extradited along the West Coast frequently, California, Washington State. Not an unusual occurrence, dependent upon how serious the charges are and how far the defendant flees.
Right, and because sometimes it could be either they fled prior to trial or it could have been that they've fled prior to sentencing. And certainly the more serious the charges, the more likely it is that we'll pay to bring them back, right?
Absolutely, yes.
Now, having done a lot of this for a number of years, and we talk about the cost, one of the things that we often ask for is we ask for bonds to make sure that people are able to report or to show up. What kind of a cost is involved with these cases when we're extraditing someone back, say, from California or from Mexico?
If we're extraditing from Mexico, which would be an international extradition through the Office of International Affairs, many times we can go through the United States Marshal's Office, and they actually incur all of the expense for the international extradition. So out of the county's budget, it's basically $0 as far as the transportation process. However, we do have to pay upfront for translation fees of all documents. Extradition costs that happen within the United States, if there is a bondsman involved, In other words, the defendant has failed to appear for trial, and pending trial, he was released on bond. If there is a bondsman involved, we can submit a bill basically to the bond company and receive payment for all of our extradition costs that the county incurred. However, if there's not a bondsman involved, such as if it's a district court warrant that's been issued and the charges have not been served, or if it's a violation of probation warrant that's been issued and no bondsman has been involved, or where they have been served with the charges but they were released on their own recognizance, we can do that as well. But the expense depends on how far they are, which could include flights and officer expenses.
Well, it's really interesting to come in and get a chance to have you share what you do. I can tell you Karen does a tremendous job with our extraditions, deals with all of our law enforcement in the county to help coordinate bringing back people to justice. Thank you so much for coming in and tell us about it this morning, Karen.
Thank you, Brian.
So enjoy your weekend. Again, this is Brian DeLeonardo, your state's attorney, and have a good day.